actually gave me my realistic goal. You know, when I was told when I was 8 years old I could be the heavyweight champion of the world. I said, but I'm 65 pounds. So you always won't always be that. And you know, I'm telling him I was 11 years old. He said, you won't always be 11.
Boxing legend Evander "The Real Deal" Holyfield is now in the toughest fight of his life, and it's not in the ring. At 61, the former champ is reportedly in critical condition, sending shockwaves through the sports world. This is the same man who brawled with Tyson and went toe-to-toe with Lennox Lewis. So, what went wrong? How did a titan of toughness land here? Stick around. This story hits harder than any punch he ever took. When you hear the name Evander Holyfield, hospital isn't the first word that comes to mind. This is the same man who brawled with Tyson and built a legacy on sheer grit. But now, he's trending for something far more serious and far less clear. Whispers of heart trouble, stress, and wild tabloid rumors are swirling. What really is going on, and is this a genuine health crisis, or just another internet firestorm fueled by speculation? Before we delve into all the details of this shocking news, let's return to April 22nd, 1994, when the boxing world was buzzing with anticipation as Evander Holyfield, the warrior who had taken on giants like George Foreman and Larry Holmes, was stepping into the ring once again. This time to defend his World Boxing Association and International Boxing Federation heavyweight titles against Michael Moorer, a younger, undefeated challenger. The match was expected to be another Holyfield triumph, however. What happened inside that ring and after would flip the entire boxing narrative upside down. Now, to most viewers that night, the fight seemed like any other intense Holyfield bout. It went the distance, lasting a total of 12 rounds filled with powerful blows, raw intensity, and unshakable determination. Holyfield was knocked down for the second time in his entire professional career in the second round. But, as always, he got back up, and he kept swinging and pressing forward. But there was something off that night, something subtle but clear. He wasn't as sharp, his movement looked sluggish. To put it all in one word, he was experiencing something that not even his toughest opponents had ever made him feel: internal fatigue. When the final bell rang, Michael Moorer was declared the winner by majority decision. Holyfield didn't just lose a title that night, he nearly lost his life. Immediately after the fight, Holyfield was rushed to the hospital where he was hospitalized. He suffered a shoulder injury and was severely dehydrated. Upon further checks, doctors discovered he had suffered acute kidney problems as a result of being dehydrated, but that wasn't the worst part. During routine post-fight examinations, something more alarming came to light. Doctors found that Holyfield had a congenital heart defect. More specifically, he was diagnosed with what's often described as a stiff heart condition, medically known as left ventricular hypertrophy. What this meant was, his heart muscle had thickened beyond normal levels, reducing its ability to pump blood effectively. It was the kind of condition that could cause a sudden cardiac arrest, especially in a high-performance athlete like a boxer. And as if that wasn't enough, further scans revealed he also had a small atrial septal defect. This meant a tiny hole between the two upper chambers of his heart that had gone undetected for years. That little defect may have been asymptomatic for most of his life, but it could have been silently compounding the risks every time he stepped into the ring. The doctors didn't mince words, and they strongly advised him to retire from boxing immediately, because this wasn't about career trajectory anymore, it was about survival. Continuing to fight meant a high possibility of collapsing in the ring, organ failure, or even death. Imagine being told that the thing you've built your entire life around, the thing that made you money and earned you fame, was now the very thing that could kill you. To the public, Holyfield's announcement came as a shock because at the time this was happening, he was just 31 years old. arguably at the prime of his career, and suddenly he was stepping away from the sport. Fans were heartbroken. Commentators speculated. Some even doubted the diagnosis, while others blamed the Moorer fight for triggering it. But behind the scenes, Holyfield was trying to process it all. He had spent his entire life preparing for battles in the ring, and now he was facing the biggest one of all, one he wasn't prepared for. Despite the somber diagnosis, what followed in the months ahead would only deepen the mystery. What happened next blurred the lines between science, faith, and sheer determination. Because Evander Holyfield wasn't just fighting for legacy anymore, he was challenging fate itself. While the boxing world moved on, Holyfield quietly underwent treatments, sought second opinions, even turning to both traditional medicine and spiritual healing, and the latter seemed to pay off in some sort of divine twist. In interviews, Holyfield publicly credited Benny Hinn's healing services with an unexpected miracle he experienced. In confirmation of this miracle, he underwent thorough screening at the Mayo Clinic, where his heart function was declared normal. As his health became more stable, his boxing license was reinstated, and he then began training again, not just to stay fit, but to prepare for a possible comeback, even though the doctors had flat out told him not to consider. By May 1995, just over a year after his supposed career-ending diagnosis, Holyfield returned to the ring to fight. But did he win, though? We will get to that in a minute. That 1994 retirement moment still sits like an inflection point in his story. It wasn't the end, but it could have been. In fact, for most people, it should have been, but Evander wasn't most people. He stepped away, not because he lost a fight, but because, for the first time, his body sounded the alarm louder than his opponents ever could. It's the kind of chapter in his life that feels surreal when you piece it together. One night you're defending world titles, the next you're in a hospital bed being told you have a heart condition that could take you out at any moment. But if anything, that moment only added to his mythos, not just as a boxer, but as a survivor, as someone who, when told you can't, quietly responded with a "watch me." Just when the world thought Evander Holyfield's gloves were hung up for good, whispers of a comeback began to stir. Risky, defiant, and utterly unthinkable, but he wasn't done yet. The comeback and the risk. Evander Holyfield's relentless return to the ring. Usually, when most people are told they have a heart condition serious enough to end their careers, they listen. Some take a step back, but Evander Holyfield wasn't like most people. In fact, if you look at his timeline post-1994 retirement, it's almost like the word retire never entered his vocabulary. He didn't just come back to boxing, but he came back with something to prove. Not to the critics, not even to his fans, but to himself. After doctors diagnosed him with a heart defect in 1994, the entire boxing world assumed that Holyfield was done. The headlines read like eulogies for a career cut short. However, behind the scenes, Holyfield was undergoing treatments, leaning heavily into his faith, and convincing himself, and soon, as the rest of the world saw, that this diagnosis didn't define him. On the 20th of May, 1995, just a year after his health scare, he shocked the sports world by stepping back into the ring to face former heavyweight champion Ray Mercer. Mercer wasn't some warm-up opponent. He was a legitimate threat, a heavy hitter with knockout power, and Holyfield wasn't exactly being eased in. From the first bell, Holyfield looked sharp, quicker than expected, more calculated, and visibly hungry. This wasn't just about scoring points. This was about redemption, and by the end of the fight, the judges handed him the unanimous decision. But anyone watching knew the bigger win was the fact that he was even standing in that ring again. From there on, he didn't stop. In 1996, just a year after his comeback, he stepped into what would become one of the most iconic boxing events of the decade, his first fight against Mike Tyson. At the time, Tyson was considered unbeatable. He was the monster of the heavyweight division, the man who had steamrolled through opponents with terrifying efficiency. But Holyfield walked into that ring with a calm that felt eerie. He wasn't there to try his luck. He was there to win, and win he did. Holyfield stunned the world by stopping Tyson in the 11th round, and that victory didn't just revive Holyfield's career. It elevated him into a whole new echelon of greatness. Of course, there was a rematch, and this was when Tyson made headlines for his stunts with Holyfield's ear during the fight, causing a serious injury, and even that moment, as bizarre as it was, became part of the Holyfield legend. It became proof that he could endure not just punches, but anything that came his way, no matter how surreal. After Tyson, Holyfield wasn't content to ride off into the sunset. Instead, he set his sights on Lennox Lewis, the British powerhouse with technical precision and towering presence. Their 1999 battle was marketed as the fight to finally unify the heavyweight titles. However, the fight ended in a controversial draw. Many felt Lewis had done enough to win, but the backlash was loud, and the rematch came quickly. In the second fight, Lewis emerged victorious, but Holyfield's performance proved once again that even in his mid-30s, he was still a force, though not unbeatable, but undeniable. This wasn't just a story of wins and losses. This was a man pushing his body past its expected limits, defying what science and sports medicine were telling him, despite the risks looming quietly in the background. Every punch he took carried more than just the threat of a knockout. It carried the weight of a heart that had once been declared unfit for this kind of strain. Regardless, Holyfield continued, and through the 2000s, he took fight after fight. Some wins, some losses, but the resilience never faded. Then came 2011. Holyfield was 48 years old, and at this age, most fighters were either long retired or commentating from ringside, but not Evander. He flew to Denmark to face Brian Nielsen in what would be his final professional fight. The fact that he was even licensed to fight at 48 was controversial in itself, but he looked solid, controlled the fight, and ended it in the 10th round with a technical knockout. It was quiet, almost anticlimactic, but in a way, fitting. He didn't need fireworks anymore. The fight was a final statement that can be interpreted as, "I still had it. I never lost it." And yet, Holyfield still wasn't done. It felt like the perfect ending, but Holyfield's story had one more twist. 10 years later, he'd step into the ring again, not for glory, but for something far more complicated. Fast forward a decade, and it's 2021. Holyfield is now 58 years old, and somehow, at this age, he's scheduled for an exhibition match against former Ultimate Fighting Championship fighter Vitor Belfort. Originally, Oscar De La Hoya was supposed to be in that ring, but after he pulled out due to a COVID-19 diagnosis, Evander Holyfield stepped in as a last-minute replacement. The move was met with heavy criticism because Holyfield hadn't fought in 10 years, so he wasn't exactly in prime shape. The California State Athletic Commission even refused to license him, which is why the fight had to be moved to Florida. That alone should have been a red flag. The fight didn't go well. From the opening bell, it was clear Holyfield's reflexes had slowed. His timing was off. His punches looked labored, and Belfort capitalized quickly, landing clean shots and knocking Holyfield down within minutes, forcing the referee to call it off in the first round. It was honestly hard to watch, and not because Holyfield was embarrassed, but because he's far too accomplished for that. Because it was the first time we really saw the effects of age catch up with him. The 2021 fight wasn't just a loss, it was a mirror. A sobering moment where even the most die-hard fans had to admit that this legend, this iron-willed fighter who had defied everything from bad calls to bad health, was finally showing signs of mortality. It wasn't a fall from grace. It was a reminder that even the greats eventually must stop fighting. But that's what makes Holyfield's journey so compelling. His return in 1995 wasn't just about proving he could still box. It was about reclaiming control over a life that others tried to limit. From Mercer to Tyson, from Lewis to Nielsen, he fought not just for titles, but for the right to keep writing his own story even when it hurt, even when it scared people, and even when the risks far outweighed the rewards. His return defied odds, but after years of brutal battles and public triumphs, a new fight was brewing. One outside the ring, where fame, family, and legacy would collide. Evander Holyfield today. Fame, family drama, and the quiet life of a boxing legend. Today, at 62 years old, he's a very different man from the one we saw in the ring trading punches with boxing royalty. But that doesn't mean he's faded into the background. If anything, the way Holyfield navigates fame, family, and the fallout from decades of living in the spotlight is more fascinating now than it ever was. First off, if you're one of those people who still thinks of Holyfield as retired and resting, think again, because even though he's not stepping into the ring anymore, he's far from invisible. In fact, Evander's been pretty active on Instagram, posting glimpses into his everyday life, showing off his kids, sharing motivational quotes, and even dropping throwback fight footage that still gets fans hyped. It's low-key, nothing flashy, but it's enough to remind the world that he's still around, still proud, and still very much Evander Holyfield. You'll often see him attending UFC events, shaking hands with Dana White, taking photos with fighters, and getting love from younger athletes who grew up idolizing him. It's actually kind of surreal that this titan of 90s boxing still gets front-row respect decades later from a completely different generation of combat sports. He doesn't demand attention. He doesn't need to. He just walks in, calm and confident, and the crowd reacts. There's a sort of quiet royalty to it. He doesn't have to say a word. His presence speaks volumes, but as much as he's enjoying public appearances and social media appreciation, Evander's current chapter isn't all nostalgia and fanfare. In fact, lately, his name has been surfacing in headlines for something completely outside of the sports world, and it's a little messy. Earlier this year, Holyfield found himself in legal hot water over child support issues. According to court documents and several celebrity news outlets, he allegedly fell behind on payments, sparking a legal dispute that quickly gained traction online. Now, this isn't the first time his finances have raised eyebrows. Holyfield has a known history of money troubles, from failed business ventures to selling off his massive Atlanta estate years ago. But still, hearing that a man who once earned over $250 million in the ring is facing legal trouble over child support is jarring. The legal battle involves one of his younger children, and the details are a little frustrating, especially for fans who want to see their hero thriving in his golden years. According to reports, the court ordered him to pay thousands in overdue payments, and there was some back and forth over missed deadlines. Some online commentators were quick to drag him, painting him as another celebrity who couldn't manage his fortune, but others showed empathy. After all, Holyfield has 11 children, and he's been through decades of public and private strain. Divorce settlements, alimony, business losses. It adds up, and here's what makes this even more compelling. Holyfield hasn't responded publicly. No denial, no Instagram clapbacks, no press conference. He's just silent. And that silence has sparked even more curiosity on if he is protecting his family's privacy, or if he is quietly working out the payments. Some fans believe this a sign of something deeper, perhaps personal struggles that go beyond what any headline can capture. But what is especially striking is how normal he seems online. No signs of stress, no dramatic posts, just calm videos, fitness clips, and the occasional shout-out to his favorite athletes or motivational causes. In one post, he even wished his followers a blessed Sunday with a smile on his face and scripture in the caption. That's just the Holyfield brand, tough on the outside, anchored in faith on the inside. On one hand, you've got a man attending UFC events, still receiving standing ovations and posing with champions. On the other, you've got a father navigating legal pressure over family obligations, the kind of story you'd usually see about a rapper or actor not a four-time heavyweight champion. But this is real life, and Holyfield is living it under a microscope that never quite turns off. What makes this chapter in his life so fascinating is that it doesn't feel like a downfall. It feels like a man figuring it out, day by day, just like anyone else, except with decades of fame behind him and cameras still watching. The mystique of being a boxing legend doesn't protect you from real-world complications. If anything, it amplifies them. People expect perfection, but Holyfield never promised that. What he gave the world was resilience, and even now, through legal issues, aging, and shifting public narratives, that resilience is still visible. So while there's no flashy comeback on the horizon, no title belts to chase, and no big Hollywood movie about his life just yet, Evander Holyfield is still very much present. In the gym, on Instagram, in courtrooms, and in conversations. His story isn't over, it's just different. And for those of us watching from the sidelines, it's a reminder that greatness doesn't always come wrapped in championship belts. Sometimes, it comes in the quiet way a man keeps showing up even when the spotlight has shifted. Do you think Holyfield's relentless comebacks were a testament to his strength, or a warning about pushing the human body too far? Was his return to the ring in 2021 a moment of bravery, or a painful misstep? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.